So the first person that I wanted to do a spotlight for, as I've mentioned in sort of an intro I did separately, is going to be Beth, who is one of my 3 very closest friends, and I have known her for very nearly 20 years now in just the next couple of months. So we're gonna have to work on planning out something for that, because that's gonna be like, oh my god. Yeah. Anyway, so I'll talk a little bit about her, and then the rest of the video will be sharing some of the lovely times we've had together over the years from many videos that I have just sort of gathered and hoarded in my computer. So anyway, Beth is someone I met way back in like 2001, roughly, when I first moved to town, when my mom and my stepfather first started dating. I believe that we met before they actually got married at some point, because we were visiting the neighborhood off and on for a decent while beforehand. Basically we met because her family lived 2 houses away from my stepdad's house. So there was a hill, and she lived at the top of the hill. There was 2 houses between ours, and then there was mine, like halfway down that hill. And basically, with my stepfather having lived in this neighborhood for, I think, since like the 70s, there wasn't really a whole lot of kids my age and David's age at that point in time, because I was around 8, he was around 6, and so yeah, we used to kind of lament that fact until one point we randomly were outside in the neighborhood, and there's like a crossroad, an intersection basically, in the neighborhood just in front of Beth's house, and we ended up stumbling across her and her sister Becky, who were just out rollerblading in the street. And I want to say that they were also having like a chalk stuff on the road as well, because that's something we also used to do, is draw like little chalk outlines of like a town on the road and like rollerblade and like run around between all the different places we drew out. So yeah, that was the first time that we had met each other. And they introduced us to 1, maybe 2 other families that had kids our age. One of them also being a girl named Elizabeth. So we had Amy Elizabeth, we had Elizabeth, and the other Elizabeth. So that's also a common theme, is I know a lot of people with Elizabeth, either as the first name or middle name. So yeah, we used to hang out a ton, and we would go between both of our houses for a while, and Beth has always been this kind of person who is very into outdoor activities. So throughout the year she's been involved with like venture crew, and she does hiking and stuff, and camping, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so we used to always pretty much hang out in her backyard fairly often, and it is a well like referenced fact that this girl did not wear shoes for the first age that I knew her, because she just was not really about the shoes. It just was not a thing. So literally outside of when we met her while she was rollerblading, I pretty much never saw her wear a pair of shoes. To the point where It took me probably, I think I usually have guessed around 3 months to realize that not only did she actually like occasionally wear shoes, that was not just the only epiphany. The epiphany was, oh my god, she actually owns shoes. Because never. This girl, I don't know how she calloused. She had something, there's that whole thing where you're supposed to like, my feet could never stand being barefoot that long. That's all I'm gonna say. There are too many splinters in life for that. And they had like a wooden like swing set like set up in their backyard way back at the time. And she would just like climb that barefoot. And I was like, I don't understand how you can do this. My feet too sensitive. But anyway. So that is a lovely little anecdote, so to speak. And also we ended up finding out that her family ended up being in the same church as us as well, the LDS church. And so I remember my mom and I would spend the next several weeks, because the way that the church is set up, you have different like on Sundays you meet up with those in your area. So we're like, they must be like the other group that meets just after our group. And so we would stay after our meetings ended to try and like catch them coming into the building and like starting their like sacrament meeting. And we were always so confused when we never saw them until we figured out, oh, we were on the edge of the district, so they actually were going to a completely different building on the other end of town from where we had been going. But once we actually like moved into the neighborhood, we ended up getting transferred over into that meeting group as well. So then we actually started seeing them and going to classes with them and everything. So that was also interesting. So yeah, we ended up spending a fair bit of time together the first several years that we knew each other, outside of school basically, since she was homeschooled and I was not. So most of the rest of the time outside of school is when we would be hanging out together, because the bus stop was also right outside her house, so it would be fairly common for a while for me to literally get off the bus and just walk up to her house if I saw her there and just like hang out for like an hour before I actually went home from the bus stop. So, because it would also, as I've said, be fairly regular to find her just chilling out in her front yard. She spent all of the time outside. So yeah. So we spent a lot of time hanging out in her yard and making up all kinds of crazy games of the era. And then when we started getting into more like teenage activities, we spent a lot of time going to church activities in particular together. Since we had girls camp every summer from when I was 11 and she was 12 until I think when I was 16 and she was 17, or maybe a year prior, because we went to girls camp for 6 years. Only one of which we actually went to 2 different camps when I moved away briefly. And the last 2 years of camp we actually were like youth leaders and had like our own like groups of like the younger girls from the camp, so we actually paired together to be like camp leaders the last 2 years. Excuse you, sir. And that was so much fun, and girls' camp was some of the best summertime activities. And then also we would have youth dances hosted by the church about once a month as well that we would go to together. And a lot of times they would be themed, so there was one. So anyway, there was a Disney themed one once. There's been a few decades themed dances. We had a tacky formal for the New Year's dance between 2010 into 2011. We had a church-hosted prom that we got to go to together twice between junior and senior year. And we had like a whole cultural celebration where we had to learn dances. We actually had two of them, to be honest. One that the church did just with a whole bunch of people from a whole bunch of the different groups of the church throughout the like general Atlanta area. And then that was in 2007, and then we had another one in 2011, and we did a lot of the dance practices for that. And the 2011 one we actually did even more, where Beth and I, and then two other girls, Paige and her sister Becky, Beth's sister Becky that is, got selected to be like the Olympic flag girls for the Atlanta Temple Cultural Celebration, as it was called, Southern Lights. And so on top of the dance that we did, where we basically did sort of like a ragtime cakewalk dance, and then the four of us individually, like the cakewalk dance was like a big one with like several of the meeting groups for the church, and then the Olympic flags was just the four of us individually. Because basically the whole show was centered around like the history of the church, and also just like fitting it into the history of Georgia as well. So we just did like this super short version of the Olympic fanfare with flags, and we did a longer version of it in the 2007 dance cultural thing, dance festival as we called it at the time. So since we'd already done all that, already had the flags and everything set up for it, I think is why we ended up being the ones that were chosen to do it. But we did like a super short, very condensed version this time around, as opposed to it was a couple minutes long the first time we did it back in 2007, but it was super fun. So yeah. I'm trying to think of like what all I want to like kind of include. Yeah, we used to spend a lot of times, especially like the last couple years of high school, we would basically like our go-to hangout thing was like we would go out to Taco Bell and get like a party pack of tacos, and then drive out to a random playground in town, and this would be like 9 o'clock at night, so we would just literally sit on the playgrounds and eat tacos and just hang out and talk, and that was just our thing for a couple years. And we would just talk about random things. And let's see, like after high school, of course, she went ahead and went to college. Unfortunately, finances did not allow for us to go to college together, though that was something that we both had sort of anticipated. So yeah. When I finally started getting into working, one of the first jobs that I had was working at the Taekwondo studio that she had been working at for a year or two prior. where basically she did teach, like, she did help with teaching a few of the actual Taekwondo classes, but the main thing that she was in charge of doing was the after-school program that was hosted through the Taekwondo school. And since she had more school stuff going on and she was doing more competitions, they were looking for more people to kind of like expand the program, and so I ended up kind of working with her there. Though we kind of had like offset schedules because she was usually teaching and whatnot. And so we ended up working together there for the majority of the school year from 2013 to 2014. And that was a very busy time for both of us. And then basically I ended up moving down here to Middle Georgia in early 2016 when Ed and I were getting ready to get married, based on like lease timings and whatnot at that point when the actual move occurred. And of course Beth and my other friend Lisa and actually Eleanor were all able to be there when we got married as well, which of course I had to include Beth regardless. And I was very happy that she was able to actually make it, since over the last few years it has been a little bit tougher for us to find time, just with both of us working full-time and just living so far away. But anyway, so there's that, and then she ended up graduating from college, I think May of that same year. I believe it was 2016 as well. Not maybe 2015. Maybe, no, because I had to drive up from here, so it was 2016. Anyway, that's kind of like a lot of information dumped over like almost 20 minutes. This is gonna be rough to edit already. Anyway, that's kind of a general rundown of the history and a little bit, but now I will go ahead and transition into actually sharing some of the events that I talked about, as well as just other fun times that we have spent together over the years. So enjoy.
on, let me start. Go in. Nice here.
You should have just.
You were practically married.
Again.
Because I'm magic, that's why.
Are these relightable? They're relightable. Bitch. Die, you bitch.
I'm a dragon.
Let's see how that works.
I look normal, you just look like you're on drugs.
Yeah. Pretty much.